Ravenswood was a quiet town, the kind of place where everyone knew each other and secrets didn't stay buried for long. But there was one secret, one terrifying truth that people refused to talk about: Devil's Creek. The stories varied. Some claimed it was once the site of a mass drowning, others whispered about an old cult that used to gather there at midnight. But one thing remained the same. If you heard knocking at your window after midnight, you must never open your eyes. Jack, Emily, and Lucas had grown up with these stories, passed down from their parents and grandparents. Most people in Ravenswood avoided Devil's Creek, but for the three of them, the legend was nothing more than an old ghost story, something kids used to scare each other. Until the night they decided to see for themselves. It was a cold October night when Jack and his friends set out. The air carried the scent of damp earth, and the trees stood tall like silent watchers. Their flashlights cut through the thick darkness, but it wasn't enough to chase away the feeling that something was watching them. "I still don't get why we're doing this," Emily muttered, hugging her jacket close. "Because," Lucas grinned, "it's our last year here. We can't leave without proving this whole thing is just a story." Jack forced a chuckle, but deep down, something about this felt wrong. As they walked deeper into the woods, the air grew unnaturally still. No crickets, no rustling leaves, just silence. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Then they reached it, Devil's Creek. The water was black as ink, barely reflecting the moonlight. A heavy fog curled over the surface, moving unnaturally, as if it had a mind of its own. Lucas picked up a rock and threw it into the creek. The splash echoed too loudly, the ripples spreading slower than they should have. And then Emily gasped. Jack turned to see what she was staring at. Footprints. A single trail of wet, bare footprints led away from the creek's edge. But there were no prints leading toward it, only away. A sudden chill crawled up Jack's spine. Lucas tried to laugh it off. "Someone must have come out here before us." Emily shook her head. "In bare feet, in the middle of the night." Jack opened his mouth to speak. Then they heard it. Knock. The sound was sharp and clear, coming from somewhere behind them. They spun around, flashlights trembling. Knock. Knock. This time, it was from the other side. Jack felt his pulse hammering. "Who's there?" Silence. Then a whisper, so soft it barely carried through the trees. "Go home." Panic surged through Jack as he grabbed Emily's arm. "We need to go. Now." They turned and ran, crashing through the underbrush. The knocks followed them, growing faster, louder, closer. Knock. 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 It was coming from every direction now, an unseen force pounding on the trees, the ground, the very air around them. Jack didn't dare look back. He didn't want to see what was following them. By the time they reached Jack's house, all three of them were breathless and shaking. Emily clutched her chest, gasping. "What the hell was that?" Lucas shook his head. "I don't know, but I don't think we should ever go back there." Jack swallowed hard, his heart still racing. Agreed. That night, they made a pact, never speak of what happened, never return to Devil's Creek. Jack thought it was over. He thought they were safe. But at exactly 12:03 a.m., just as he was drifting to sleep, knock. His breath caught in his throat. Knock. Knock. It was coming from his window. The stories. The warnings. If you hear knocking after midnight, never open your eyes. He squeezed his eyelids shut, willing himself not to move, not to breathe. Then a voice. "Jack." His blood ran cold. It was Emily's voice. "Jack, let me in. It's cold out here." He wanted to scream. Emily wasn't outside. She was at home. He had texted her an hour ago before bed. His fists clenched the sheets. "Don't look. Don't look." The voice grew softer. "Please. Jack, it's so cold." Jack bit his lip, so hard he tasted blood. Then the voice changed. It became something else. Something wrong. A guttural whisper laced with something ancient. Something inhuman. "You were warned." Jack felt a pressure on his chest, like something was crawling onto his bed. His entire body screamed for him to run, to open his eyes and fight. But he didn't. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the knocking stopped. The presence lifted. The room fell silent. Jack lay there shaking until the first light of dawn spilled through his window. The next morning, Jack checked his phone. A text from Emily. "Did you hear knocking last night?" His stomach dropped. Lucas texted next. "Guys, I think something followed us back." And then came the worst message of all. A single voicemail. Jack hesitated before playing it. At first, just static. Then the knocking. Knock, 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 and a whisper. "We see you." Jack dropped the phone. It wasn't over. They came when he slept, and they were never leaving.